This video will feature spoilers for the Zone of the Enders 1, since this, while there is a spin-off title, it's the second entry and I will make comparison points between this and the first entry's world building, so I said there will be spoiler comments for Zone of the Enders 1. Alright then, you have been warned, okay? Alright? Let's go! Zone of the Enders: The Fist of Mars originally came on the Game Boy Advance and was developed by Winkysoft, with this being a spin-off to Zone of the Enders franchise, but does a lot for the world building of the Zone of the Enders. This entry is probably the entry I've seen no one really talk about, aside from just mention the fact that Zone of the Enders is a GBA spin-off entry as a fun fact, so really wanted to check it out for myself to see what exactly it brought. And like I said, the story in this game, with its narrative focus, adds so much to the world building of the Zone of the Enders that I feel like the PS2 games don't really do. The main premise that within the Zone of the Enders universe, in the year 2173, mankind has progressed so far that they have created colonies on Mars and Jupiter in order to expand searching for a valuable resource referred to as Metatron. But those who were born and raised within Mars and Jupiter, or at least the colonies, are insultingly referred to as Enders by people who were natively born on Earth, with Earthlings establishing many ways to oppress Enders, whether it be by controlling the citizens, adding more taxes or restrictive laws, anything to feel like Earthlings have supremacy over those who were not born on Earth, with our game's main character being named Cage Midwell, a person who was working on the express ship Bonaparte 3 until it was suddenly attacked by a black orbital frame. During the chaos, Cage ends up meeting this mysterious woman named Myona, and they both end up escaping on a mysterious Lev in order to, well, not die. After escaping the destruction and landing on Mars, Cage and Myona are instead accused of being terrorists who destroyed the express ship instead of being survivors, claiming that the media has already put out that there were no survivors of the destruction of Bonaparte 3. And Myona now has amnesia, so there's that to deal with too. But after being saved by a man named Deckson, Cage ends up joining Deckson's faction, BIS, or Born in Space, who are a resistance group in order to fight back against the oppression that Earthlings are causing towards those who are natively born on Mars and Jupiter. Right off the bat, I do mean right off the freaking bat, there are so many things going on, but the main point is that Cage and Myona have now joined the resistance group, with Myona having amnesia and not remember anything of her life, with the main game story featuring a whole lot of world building and essentially political warfare between BIS and trying to stop the corrupt Earth government with the oppression they do to the Enders. And there are several things this game will go through to highlight the oppression, whether it be how BIS, despite being a resistance group, constantly being labeled as a terrorist group and blamed for all the stuff going on, but the main excuse being that Earth may just want to add more oppressive laws, like, hey, rather than just saying they're going to increase the prices on Earth food to Mars in an attempt to starve out Martians, they instead go blame it on BIS and claim, well, because of the terrorist group, we have to increase the prices of the Earth food, when none of that is true. Hell, members of BAS aren't even killing the Earthling forces that they go against, with them expressly being pacifistic, but the propaganda is gonna be propaganda. Or seeing how civilians from Mars try to protest what Earth is doing and oppressive laws, only for the Earth forces to try and take advantage of the situation in order to essentially have legally allowed violence and genocide of the Martian people, with the people in charge of the Earth armies constantly treating Martians as less than human. And just the plot and political intrigue in the narrative, I feel, works very well and in some cases relevant nowadays, but it's just more interesting story to me than compared to the first game. I like the first game, I like the story of the first game and Leo and everything, but here it's more focused on the civilians and the groundwork and what's going on, as opposed to Zoe 1, which focused more on the plight of Leo himself and trying to deliver Jehuti to the Space Force, who were fighting back against an oppressive regime. Despite this being a GBA spinoff, this entry is actually pretty long and very story focused, with the fact that there's a lot of twists and turns in the narrative. I will say the second half of the narrative I feel wasn't as interesting as the first half or where things go, but it still feels very well done world building for the Sortie and his universe, and really highlights the conflict from all sides, including fleshing out aspects that you only really heard about in the first game, but didn't get the full details of them until this entry. As for the cast and characters themselves, they're alright. Honestly, there are times were entertaining, but honestly the characters are not that interesting alone, considering you could tell they basically just gave them an archetype and just ran with it. So they're better together, but when they're just scenes just talking amongst themselves, you can tell there's not really a whole lot for them to say outside of the main mission and trying to fight back against the Earth government in order to establish more rights for Martians. You also have the dynamic between Cage, Myona, and the LEV that Cage is using to fight with, which I will say now, the LEV ends up early on revealing itself to not be an LAV, but actually an orbital frame named Testament, with the AI on the orbital frame being named Pharsti, and the Pharsti's AI is so drastically different from what you deal with Ada in the first game, where Pharsti is way more off the bat to be more of a companion to Cage, even to the point where the Cage can just call out for Pharsti when in danger, and the orbital frame can move itself towards Cage to rescue him quickly. So here, Cage has way more dynamic with Pharsti as the AI of the orbital frame Testament. Overall, I do like the writing of Zodiac as a Fist of Mars. Even if the characters themselves aren't the most interesting, the kind of narrative and world building they add to the universe is great, and I do really appreciate how it fleshes out the world, and I do like Cage as a main character, with him being someone that not only has self-confidence issues, but also when a failure happens, tends to end up blaming the failure on other people or some other thing other than himself, whilst trying to also motivate himself to do things, even having a friend named Ares, who was also part of the resistance force that he relies on to essentially help motivate him in order to participate in essentially a war, with the narrative doing well to highlight every side when it comes to the conflict between Mars, Jupiter, and Earth, highlight the Earth people's perspective and how much they despise those not natively born Earth, or highlighting how some people who may want independence for Martians but may end up trying to do things in a different way than the resistance group initially have, considering the resistance group is pacifistic, they do attack people, try to stop Earth forces, but they're doing it to not kill anyone in the process because they want more people to live and just want more equality for the people of Mars. But some people may take advantage of that situation. Now for the gameplay, where it's a turn-based tactical RPG, with you always having a preset party when it comes to what maps you're doing. So depending on what the story says, certain characters may not even be there for the mission, including even Cage himself. But when it comes to the gameplay, you have the ability to move around the map and attack, but weirdly, you can only move and attack in the same turn if the character gets up close to the enemy. For some reason, despite having many long-range attacks, you could never just move and do a long-range attack. You can do a long-range attack if you don't move, but if you move and try to do a long-range attack, the game won't let you. You can move and do a close-range attack. It's just a weird aspect to it. It just gives you less options. Like, overall, this game just doesn't have a lot of options for tactical gameplay. Like, one thing I wish you could do is that when you are being attacked, you have the option to counter back, which I feel would make combat go faster and also take advantage of enemies that mess up. but you don't have that. So attacking can be a slow process. It may seem like missions take a while because of how long it takes to take things out. Enemies have a sliver of HP left, and you may have to wait till next turn in order to take them out. Now, in order to try to add the high-speed action of Sortie enters to the mechs is the fact that on by default is a little mini game where you're able to have to chase down the enemy in order to attack them. If you manage to attack the little reticle, you'll do a critical hit to deal even more damage. But the enemies also attack you. We need to do this minigame to avoid being hit. And let me tell you, this minigame makes combat not an issue because it's very easy in this minigame to just avoid taking hits. You can just have characters stand in the middle of an entire battlefield and have so many enemies try to attack them, but because in the minigame, they just won't take damage so long as you avoid taking the really little marker in the middle of the minigame, making it very easy to just not die in this game, especially on missions where it could be a requirement saying if this character's defeated, then the mission's automatically a failure, but they can just dodge everything. You can turn off this minigame if you want and go pretty based on stats, but one, you're handicapping yourself for no reason, and two, it's like I said, it tries to add the high-speed action of Sortie Enders into the mix of a more slow-paced genre, so that's their attempt to try and add more to Zoe flavor. Like I mentioned earlier, the LEV Cage is using, it's being revealed to be an orbital frame, and there are certain missions where you can find a data point to move orbital frame testament to those data points in order to actually install more programs, give yourself more abilities, but it means having Cage be out of the action because they're always generally off a far off point where the mission actually wants to go. So it's a kind of risk reward of if you want more abilities, take Testament there. But if that means Testament is out of commission when it comes to actually doing things, since you're busy doing that. So there is a risk versus reward aspect. And when it comes to the gameplay, they make you feel the difference between using an LEV and an orbital frame, because orbital frames just move further, deal more damage, but you can't really upgrade them on a normal way, because in between missions, you can upgrade all the LEVs that characters are using, but you can't upgrade the orbital frames themselves that way. They cannot be upgraded with money, they're going to be upgraded by getting more programs from the data points. So they do have the whole trade-off in order to not make the orbital frames completely OP. In a game where you're OP, because you can avoid every single hit by being good at a minigame. You can also change the balance of your units, where by default they're in a neutral state, but you can, for example, increase more defense or make it so they're harder to hit when it comes to the minigame, even though by default you're already hard to hit. Or you can increase their damage output or increase their accuracy. When you're playing a minigame, then you control their accuracy, so why not increase the more damage so you get missions done faster? And it is a big difference in damage, you just increase it all the way, which you probably should, because there are many missions where you just bombard you with so many enemies, because you have to mitigate everything and no counterattack. That means missions can just take a while, so I actually recommend just increasing your damage output for all your units to get things done faster. Fortunately, there are several mission types in this game, like some are just defeat the main threat and not the actual army itself. Some could be just get to a certain point, so we do have variety, not a whole lot since they will default a lot of times to destroy every enemy, but there are also some maps that are just very small and very short as well, so it can fluctuate on what's going on. One mission uniquely was an entire stealth mission, where to do is just get to the goal, but without being within 3 grids of the enemy. So I said, they do try to shake things up when it comes to the mission structure and everything, to try and keep things more fresh and not fully repetitive. Depending on how you do missions, there are also different outcomes to a mission that generally end in a game over state, but it's unique that you can actually try and do a mission and do it incorrectly. I don't mean like, oh, you just failed a mission. I mean the fact of you do the task, but you do something that the game clearly, despite the task, give you the other better option. And you do the lesser of the 2 options, then you may get a different outcome for the mission that'll lead to a different scenario, but I said it'll still lead to a game over state. But it is an interesting thing that they have this little branch where a mission can end differently, even if essentially just ends with the game giving you a game over. But It's just a unique thing to add. Although the game does have a good and bad ending, with a certain mission being the outcome whether or not you're on a good ending path or bad ending path, everything. So there is a way to get a different outcome that does shift what happens in a narrative in a more greater way. So there's an interesting aspect that he added that, which I didn't even know going in it was a good or bad ending kind of thing. So it's interesting to see that there is a bad ending pathway with a certain mission that makes sense that failing this thing is what's giving you a different pathway, considering how important it was. But it's just interesting that this GBA spinoff also has multiple endings, just like how the first entry did. But except for the main gameplay, it may get repetitive and dull at a certain point, because I said, it's not like with two different mission types, everything, you're still doing the same thing. Even if the orbital frames have way more power, everything, you're still doing a lot of the same thing. And I often found myself just beelining it towards the main targets of missions to get the mission completely over with, because this game essentially has 26 episodes or chapters to the game. Like I said, makes it longer than the PS2 main entries. So this game, which does a lot to help the world building and narrative of Zelda Enders, also feels like it goes on for a good while. Interesting enough, you can also reverse the story scenes if you miss some dialogue, which, I don't know, for a GBA game, I did not expect that to be a thing. So it is an interesting aspect. But, like I said, there are other branches when it comes to narrative, so they do have that try and keep things more interesting. Overall, I do enjoy Sortie Enders The Fist of Mars. Adds a whole lot to the Zoe universe, even if the gameplay itself feels not as great to go through compared to other tactical RPGs for the system, like Fire Emblem, that could have stuff like a counter ability to make combat go faster, or more things to make the combat more engaging. Like I said, from the get-go, you can be overpowered if you just do the minigame for combat and just avoid all damage, while the enemies have that luxury, since you targeting them means they'll probably take a hit. If you manage to hit the little weak spot, then they'll take even more damage for a critical hit. And the fact that you have every reason to just increase your power over accuracy means there's no reason not to be overpowered, combined with the power gap between the LAV and the orbital frames. So, like I said, the gameplay, it could have used a bit more considering the runtime. The story itself is good, even if the cast themselves aren't the most interesting characters, but they get the job done in helping the narrative of the conflict between the Enders and the Earthlings. On top of the fact of all the ways the characters have to try and find a way to expose some of the corruption the Earth forces are doing on Mars and what's going on. So I do like the political drama of the game itself, but like I said, there's a point where it feels like the story goes a bit down because of a shift in focus, but also at the same time, still adding more to the world building and everything. Although the second runner will completely ignore its target existence, sadly. So that's what I gotta say about Sortie: The Fist of Mars. It is definitely, I feel like, an entry people should talk about more, at least more than just a footnote of, did you know there was a GBA entry? Yes, it was the second entry to come out. Yes. What? We're going to say now, like, did you know that this game, the franchise, also had an anime OVA movie and 20 episode anime? Like, great, they're footnotes. What we can say about it, because I ain't watching those animes. That's what I got to say about Fist of Mars. Alright then, good day.